Hiya, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Nice to see you and hear you in our
Likewise.
virtual conversation. I've been looking forward to it.
Oh, thank you, Nicole. I appreciate being here. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, it's wonderful. Well, I'd love to start by introducing you. Does that sound
Okay.
good?
Sounds great.
All right.
Yeah.
So let's see. Chaya Rivka Mayerson is a child psychologist in San Francisco with over 20 years experience working with children, teens, adults, parents, and families. Over her career, she's worked with UCSF, Kaiser, Parents Place, and she has consulted with many schools in the area. So welcome, and
Thank you.
again, thanks for taking the time, Chaya.
Sure.
All
Thank you for
right.
asking me to be here.
Well, it's an important subject, and that is, during the pandemic, trying to find, tools that can be helpful to parents so that they can help their teens. And I would so appreciate just hearing your thoughts and your suggestions around how best we as parents can support our teens during this really tough time during the pandemic.
Well, thank you. Yes, I mean, especially since I'm sure that your audience is not just in San Francisco County, but in the greater Bay Area.
Yeah.
So different counties are responding differently around schools, and some are now, even high schools are considering, well, who knows now, because there's been another elevation in COVID cases, but a lot of the high schools were even considering a hybrid model for the second semester. But all the students I know are like waiting for the moment where they might be able to go back to school. And so until this point, they've been sequestered at home. Every family I know is struggling with how to manage anxiety in the home for themselves as adults, much less help their kids get through it.
Yeah.
The other thing that always comes up is phone overuse, which is a common family fight because kids want to stay up too late. And the other thing is kids get really depressed when they need each other, and when they don't have their friends to hang out with. And it's not allowed for a variety of different reasons. Every family is going to have their reasons for letting their kid go out or not letting their kid go out. If there's someone that's not well in their family and they need to protect them, they're going to encourage their kid not to go out at all. I've seen that. And I've seen other families who are a little bit more liberal in their going out policy. But then there's COVID in the house because the kids bring COVID home. So I feel like I've seen a whole gamut of different things going on, and there has to be a medium ground where everyone's learning how to social distance and be safe and see their friends and be happy, which is hard to do when no one's really happy during a global pandemic.
Yeah, it's the reality.
Yeah, it is.
So are there thoughts that you have around families, for instance, you mentioned anxiety, and anxiety being higher right now for, adults as well as for teens. Do you have suggestions around how parents specifically might approach that topic of anxiety? And if they see anxiety in their teens, what do they do?
Well, and anxiety might look different kid to kid or family to family. Sometimes we see it as adults and sometimes we don't. Usually it's because people they're not getting along with their kids or vice versa, or there's sort of a sudden change in their behaviors or personalities, or you just notice everyone's sort of on a shorter fuse than usual. And that means usual meaning we're all on short fuses. So it's even more
Definitely
short than short. So it's kind of like that, and people are kind of running out of ideas. It's not just go walk around the block or get a drink of water. It's really manifesting in more panic attacks, more isolation, more shortness of breath, which is sometimes confused with the COVID symptoms, poor sleep, poor eating patterns. We're seeing that manifest more. And when I work with pediatricians, what we're really working on is helping families develop 3 important, we call it pillars. And one is that every family needs. I mean, some of this is common sense, but to really put it into place, because we get kind of loose being at home so much, and every day seems like a weekend, even though it's not. And there's all sorts of different ways that kids are finding loopholes in whatever family rules used to be.
They're smart, aren't they?
Yeah, and parents are like, whatever, I'm tired. People they get a little bit kind of loose and sort of establishing a rule pattern because everyone knows it's not the same, but they have to go to school. So the three most important things are sleep, adequate sleep, and for teenagers, it's still 10, 11 hours because their brains are still developing. They still need sleep for their brains to recompensate from the day and to refocus. And so getting enough sleep is hard if you're staying up really late. Even if you're going to a competitive high school, excuses about homework, we all understand it. But if the kids aren't getting enough sleep, they're not going to be well the next day. And I've seen a lot of kids suffering from sleep deprivation and insomnia. And so they think the parents, it's not even phones sometimes, the parents feel like their kids are at least in bed by whatever hour, but the kids are just staring at the ceiling and their anxiety is just keeping them up. So there might be some techniques we can help with around sleep hygiene.
Okay.
The next thing is structure. So people definitely need structure in their day. Normally they would be going to school, and when the passing period, everyone has a class schedule. Everyone knows when they need to get up to get to school, et cetera, coming home, sports, whatever, after school. But because parents are now principals and teachers and school counselors, as well as parents, they have to really remember to come up with a schedule that makes sense for their kid. That's not just the time they're spending on the Zoom call for class, but it's also downtime after that. It's also how to get through the Zoom call, that Zoom fatigue, a little bit in a healthier way. Physical exercise helps, weird little stretching helps even. There's all sorts of tricks and tools around how to stay focused for long periods of time with a screen, which is very uncomfortable, especially for kids who are usually more active, physically active. So how to have structure in the day, beginning, middle, and end. And for little kids, it's easier. You can write it up on a whiteboard and have them see it and have it be sort of games and fun stuff with stickers. With adolescents, it's really more giving them the power to adhere to a schedule that is co-created by the parent and the youth.
So the teen is giving input.
That's right. So they have buy-in because they know their schedule, and the parents, it's less of a top-down approach. It has to be a side-by-side approach with kids. So it's more about helping them make decisions that make sense, and making sure they have some exercise and getting out, and not just preferring all their waking hours on video games or Zoom calls. Their eyes need a rest. I mean, my eyes need a rest.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just hard to stare at pixelated screens all day. And yeah. Anyway, we all know that. And then have at dinner time, have meals together if you can, breakfast and dinner at least, and have other times that's not about chores, that's about having fun. And we all know pulling teens out for a family hike isn't always the easiest, depending on your kids. Sometimes they really like it. Other times they're very happy saying no a lot and not going anywhere. So how to create some kind of structure that enables the kid to get out and ride their bike with their friends. And that's really their leverage. The leverage is social. So the first part is sleep, second part is structure, and the third part that we know about is the social piece.
Okay.
You can't have
hugely
kids
important.
Yeah. So if there's too socially isolated, it tends to affect their mental health. And that's where, for those kids, I have seen kids, they haven't been out since March. I know it sounds kind of horrific, but they have a medically vulnerable person at home. Sometimes the parents are really racked with anxiety. There's all sorts of reasons why that might happen. Sometimes the kids themselves or their siblings are not well. Anyway, we can all imagine what it's like to live in four walls without going out to
completely
see people.
Isolated.
Yeah, and that has a real effect on our brain. So to just see people socially distanced, even from some families were getting creative in the beginning, and like one family would be on one side of the street, the other family would be on the other side of the street in their cars waving so the kids could see each other. Now I think people understand that going out on a Friday night to somewhere with one or two friends, socially
Mm-hmm.
distanced,
Mm-hmm.
is okay.
Mm-hmm.
If the families and the parents have to, this is where it's different than little kids. Parents are having to call the other parents first just to see if their social distance practices match their own. And there has to be a larger layer of discussion around what it's supposed to look like to be socially distanced, because some families actually are having different practices that really don't jive with a with your family or
Yeah,
whatever.
with
And
their
so
own
that,
approach. Mm-hmm.
yeah, so even though the kids are friends, like maybe that's not the best friend to hang out with right now because it just creates more anxiety in the household, et cetera. And who
Okay.
knows what they're going to bring back. So I think that's the hardest part. But I think most kids right now in November, I think most people understand, especially in San Francisco and Northern California, there's so much media and so much education. I think they tend to understand the results of poor social distancing or taking too many chances. And even though teens are famous for taking risks, and that's part of being a teenager, this is not one risk that we want them to take because it just has such horrible consequences.
Right. Okay. Haya,
Anyway, yeah.
this is really helpful.
Hmm.
The three tiers, is that what you called it? The three tiers?
Let's call it
Three,
tiers. I like
three
it. Or
pillars?
pillars.
Okay. Yeah.
Your
Really.
ideas, main ideas. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it helps to, I'm finding it's helpful in terms of having takeaways that I can remind myself of and try to apply. One piece you hit on before I let you go, would you be willing to say a few words about suggestions in terms of how to pull them away from their devices, their phones, yeah, their iPads, um, the TV, to get them engaged in other things? Any parting thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, usually it's a negotiation, right? When we were kids, we didn't have endless use of a telephone, endless use of a television, because there was one per household typically, if that, and it was really obvious that you couldn't be doing all these things all hours of the night. And so we have that paradigm to this paradigm, which is endless, constant, unending stimulation from a screen.
Mhm.
And you can negotiate, you can tell them how it is with the blue light, you can tell them how the the phones or any devices tends to activate our brain, and at night we really need to work on winding down. So we can work from the science piece, we can work from the
Mhm.
practicality piece that you need them to go to sleep. You can work on just having a nice conversation and getting their opinion. And I think for a lot of the more mature adolescents, they are able to kind of see the value in putting something down. But I think the most success I see when it becomes a family plan, like we're all turning off our devices at a certain hour, we're
Okay.
all docking our devices at a certain hour. And the more extreme cases, I have parents turn off the phone completely.
Mm.
So they use parental controls to disable the Wi-Fi through their providers for the phone so the kid has no access.
Okay, so doing that one, that's a last measure. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think so, because it's a privilege to have phones, and they're
Mhm.
expensive, and parents are paying the bills. And so if you look at it from that point of view, you can see, well, you're not using this in a responsible manner, and you're
Mhm.
sort of abusing the technology and abusing our
Yeah.
house rules. And so if you cross the line, we take away the phone. Kids
Okay.
get really, I think what happens is parents get scared of their kids because kids put up such a good fight. But hopefully, you can, I think you can be reasonable because everyone's at home and because everyone's zoomed out and screened out, and instead offer social opportunities. I mean,
Okay.
it's an ongoing debate, right? And I think a
Isn't
lot of
it?
people,
Yes, I agree
and
fully.
if they're not pushing your buttons, then they're doing something wrong. So I think it's
Yeah.
good news that kids can push and push and push, but it's also important that parents see it as developmentally appropriate and sort of get some of their executive functioning to be able to sort of talk, not reason, but talk about what the parent rules are and the parent ideas, and get, sort of do sort of formal negotiations around it, knowing
Okay.
that they're not going to get everything they want, and maybe parents don't get everything they want either. But
Mm.
then it has to be a working model, because again, it's more about how helping kids to make better decisions versus telling them what to do.
Okay. Oh,
Something like that.
that's a really great thought to leave me with. Thank you.
Sure, you're welcome.
Really, that's a powerful statement, very helpful, and I'm really looking forward to other families being able to hear what you shared.
Oh,
Really
you're
great
welcome.
stuff.
I
Yeah,
hope it's helpful.
it
Thanks for
has
the
been,
call.
Haya. Thank you
Oh,
so
good.
much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Be well until next time.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.